The Venerable Bishop Fulton Sheen once told us that when we get to heaven, there will be 3 surprises for us. First, there will not be people there whom we fully expected them to make it, but didn't. Second, there will be people there whom we did not expect to make it, but did. And third, and the biggest surprise of all, is that we ourselves might make it to heaven. Jesus told us today in the gospel that we have to go through the narrow gate in order to have access to the kingdom of heaven. Now, this gate to heaven is not actually a physical gate, but one that is determined by how we live our faith. That is why the gate is narrowed when our love for one another is also narrowed. When we fail to share, to forgive, to include, and to participate. The gate of heaven is narrow, not because it is physically small, but because our own ego may be too big to pass through that gate. Now, the fact that we cannot judge or control our way or any other people's way to heaven gives us the motivation to always keep improving ourselves and to make ourselves small, like what Jesus did for us, so that the gate may not be narrow for us when we get there. So the first thing I'd like to share with you today is that the gate to heaven is only narrow for those with big ego. If we fail to be humble like Jesus and to love one another, then the gate would be always too narrow for us to pass through. And in the second reading from the letter to the Hebrews, we heard another way to understand this image of the narrow gate. For whom the Lord loves, He disciplines, and He is very strict to every son He acknowledges. And all discipline seems like a cause not for joy, but for pain at the time. Yet later, it brings the peaceful fruit of righteousness. For many of us, all the pains and sufferings and hardships that we have to face and endure every day in our lives make our way through life so narrow that sometimes it seems impossible for us to pass through. But let us remember that without darkness, we will not appreciate light. Without hunger and thirst, we will not appreciate food and drink. And without pain, we will not appreciate healing. Without goodbyes, we will not appreciate encounter. It is like when we travel to different places, we learn things that we can never do at home. So our journey through the challenges of life also brings us precious experiences and lessons that books and YouTube and TikTok will never be able to bring. So the second thing I'd like to share with you today is that all our life challenges we face and we have to go through are not in vain, but as ways for us to gain experience and to know that God is always there for us every moment of our life, in every mile of our way. And if we have been to a sport game or a concert, it may seem like the gates are always wide open for everyone. But the closer we get to the gate, the more we realize that only a few can get through those gates at the time. We have security, we have all kinds of little devices that we have to check and scan before we can get through. And we have to hold on to our own tickets. Like when we have to hold on to our own tickets to go through a game or a concert or an airport, no one can take our place and our mission in life. The question we are called to ask ourselves every day is not, what would Jesus do if He was me? Because we are not here to be copies of Jesus or of anyone, but instead ask ourselves, what would I do with God's gifts for us? And when we die and stand before God for judgment, God may not ask us, why wouldn't you live as somebody else, as Mr. A or Mrs. B? But instead, God would have asked us, why wouldn't you live as who I created you? The narrow gate to heaven for each one of us is different, The size is different for each one of us. And we cannot take or force anybody to go with us to heaven because they surely won't fit in our own standards. Let us help one another. Let us advise. Let us support one another. But let us not impose anyone with our own way. Because even God respects our freedom. God respects our choice. Let us do the same for one another so that we can see God and grow as unique individuals. So brothers and sisters, on this Sunday, 21st Sunday in Ordinary Time, let us together reflect on the 3 points that I have just shared with you. First, the gate to heaven is only narrow for those with big ego. If we fail to be humble like Jesus and to love one another, that gate is always be too small for us. Second, all the life challenges we have to face and we have to go through are not in vain, but they are ways for us to gain experience and to know that God is always by our side at all times. And third, we cannot take or force anyone to fit in our narrow gate because they are not us and we are not them. Let us help, let us advise, let us support one another, but let us never impose anyone with our own ways. The smaller our ego is, the wider the gate to heaven is for us. All our life challenges are training sessions for our maturity in faith. And we cannot impose our standards on anyone because they will simply never go into fit. May God, who has begun a good work in us, also bring it to fruitful completion. Amen.